Hi, it's very good to be speaking with you and to continue a series of conversations which have included people from various places across the sea or across the ocean. And I'm speaking to you from, you're speaking from North Germany.
Yes, indeed. From the city of Raden, which is about 2 hours by car from the coast, where I still live in the factory grounds at Coalbus, the company that I worked at for 30 years and that I ran for more than 20 years.
Yes, and we were just talking a bit about Callbus, and of course Robert Flather is the managing director of Coalbus UK Group now, I gather. So, and Greg is the manager of Coalbus UK. So we've done quite well at the stationers with our Coalbus links.
Oh yes, and then if we include Gordon Robson, who's Robert Flather's predecessor, there's a total of 4 of us. So yeah, that's quite a few alumni that have made it into the company.
Okay, so you were born in Bremen, which is just about an hour's drive north.
Yes, and I would say that's been an influence. I left the city when I was 18 years old, more or less on my birthday. But I think an important influence. My father was a timber broker, and in those days, seagoing ships still came right into the city. And with my father having a job that meant he had work in port, I remember going into port, and you actually saw ships coming in, unloading bales of cotton and bags of coffee. You no longer see that these days. And so I think I was interested in places far away and foreign countries from very young age on through that experience.
Yes, I can imagine being born in a port like Bremen, and it's one of the places I really like coming to. The sort of story of the musicians of Bremen and the little statue in the middle of the city of them, and also one of my favorite beers comes from Bremen, Beck's beer.
Oh yes, one of very famous too, and they've always been beer exporters. I think they may very well have been among the very first that thought about exporting their beers. There's a popular beer hall song in Germany that goes, "There is no beer in Hawaii," and one of their first advertising slogans was, "There is a beer in Hawaii," and of course theirs.
The Becks are there, yeah, and they used to have, they may still have, I don't know, what we call in this country a dray wagon. In other words, a wagon pulled by horses, which used to come out sort of every so often in the way it would have done in the past when things were pulled by horses.
Yeah, I would think that I would say I haven't seen that. I don't get to the city very often in the past couple of years, but that might very well still be there. Yes.
Yes, I'm sure. And has there been quite a sort of rivalry between Bremen and Hamburg?
Well, I think, well, yes, I remember when I was very young, Bremen would still have aspired to being a rival to Hamburg. Soon after, it became clear that it would never be able to match it. Hamburg is a far bigger seaport and a far bigger city. But I remember, for example, when I was a child, we still had an ocean liner connection to New York, the Bremen, which sailed from Bremen on a regular schedule, and Hamburg did not. But I think when that stopped, and then there were rivaling lines. Bremen had the Lloyd, which, as I said, ran a line to New York until the early 1970s, and Hamburg had Hapag. And then about the time they stopped going to New York, Hapag bought Lloyd. And I think that put paid to any talk of Bremen being a rival to Hamburg. At best, a smaller city, a smaller sister.
Is there shipbuilding in Bremen still or not?
Oh yeah, and yes, there's a little bit left today. It's very specialized. I remember when I was at school. You remember the oil crisis in 1973 when they blocked off the Suez Canal, and then some of the biggest oil tankers ever built were in fact built in the city.
And when you were at school in Bremen itself?
Yes, I was. We lived on the outskirts of the city, but I remember I went to a newly built school, and we had classrooms that were on like a 7th floor. And if you were on the right side of the school, you could see the dockyards, and you could see those huge tankers being built. I think they were never used. By the time they had finished building them, the Suez Canal was reopened, and they were no longer economical. But I remember seeing them build then. Those companies have all gone bust. I mean, those were huge shipyards, and they have all gone out of business since. But there are a few small ones. They specialize, for example, in luxury yachts. If you know the billionaires of this world, if they have a small little 150-meter long little boat built for them, they might very well come to a specialist in Bremen and have it built there.
Yes, I can imagine, yes. And I gather you were brought up very near the airport and used to see BEA, as it was in those days, and their flights.
Yes, they were. I think they were the most frequent airline there, because up until 1998, right? 1989, 1990, only Air France, Pan Am, and British European Airways, as it was then, were allowed to fly to Berlin, and that was heavily subsidized. So I think there were more, and then there was a route to fly to London. So I think there were more takeoffs and landing by British European than by any other airline, certainly more than Lufthansa.
Well, of course, even though you and I remember it, BEA are now part of history. It's all part of BA, of course.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But then your first trip to England in '72, so you were quite a young lad, and you came was that with school or with university? Or?
I think it was a complete coincidence, that we should have gone to England and gone to London. I think it was my mother who had the idea, because she was involved with the local, you would call it community college. Heimvolkshochschule is the German word for that. It's a well-funded movement all across country, and they had organized this excursion of I think it was 8 days, and I think it was really a coincidence, and that my mother said it's a good idea for us to go. So my parents and I went, and I would say it was a very important experience for me. I mean, I came back and I would say smitten. I was completely fascinated with the city, and I remember the one thing was, it was just after the money had been changed to decimal. And one thing, I mean, as I said, I was quite young. One thing I remember is that everyone wanted to talk about the funny new money. It was, I think we were, even though we were foreigners, we got along with money more easily than the locals, because they were still thinking in their old shillings and half crowns and pennies, and that was, I remember that as remarkable.
Yeah, we do have an extraordinary ability in this country to stick with different forms of measurement, which always never go in tens. They come in 12s and 16s and 14s, and yeah, no, I remember that happening too. And you immediately, it sounds as if you quite enjoyed the underground.
Yeah, well, I think that was at the time one of the most fascinating aspects of the city was the underground. You know, it was so easy to use. It was fast. It was something I had never seen. I mean, it was the first time that I'd been to a major city, and I had never seen an underground railway, and so. And I remember the long escalators. I was when we were going all across every day, there were certain places that we went to, and then we always used the tube, and then I was always hoping for it to be a very deep line and very long escalators that we would go up or down. And the longer they were, the more I liked it. Yes.
But we have
yes.
lots in common, because I was brought up in London, on the edge of London, although we didn't have, the underground didn't come to our part, just by how things were. But I agree, and I used to find it really exciting to go on a long escalator and then to go downstairs to the underground to trains where they made the most extraordinary noise as they came into the station, and the doors all opened up for you. That was a great excitement too. Yeah. But then you came back in over a few years and spent summers in Exmouth. How did you end up being in Exmouth?
I think again, it was by design. My parents decided it would be a good idea, at least the first summer. My parents decided it would be a good idea to send me over to England to accelerate my learning of the English language, and that was with a big organization. And I think it was Exmouth was the one place where they started from 12-year-old, so that you could go to other places in England. They had organized summer schools in other places, but Exmouth was the one they said it starts from 12-year-old. So that's how it became to be Exmouth.
Nice place to be.
Oh yes, definitely. I mean, something that something you go on holiday. I mean, you definitely don't stay in the classroom learning all day, because it's not nice outside. It's very nice there. Yes.
And then you went on to military service came next. And that was rather exciting, because you were was it the place they used to call Shape? The supreme head.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. Shape in Belgium. Yes, yeah. As I said, I went on then after the first summer in England. I got to know that family very well, and liked it there very much. I think it was a very deep immersion also in the daily life there. So when I was called up for military service and I underwent my entrance inspection, they picked up on my English skills, and so I was offered to work on a NATO staff, and that in fact that then turned out to be very exciting. I was quite lucky, I would say. Others ended up as drivers, for example, or some ended up on the staff of the German support company at the headquarters, which was way not as interesting. And I spent some time initially in the logistics staff, and then most of the time in the public information division, in the public relations staff. And yes, those were very interesting times, and I had British and American staff officers that were very generous with, I would say, letting me do things that were a bit more interesting. So I was allowed to write bits of presentation addressed at young people. This was a very very exciting time in the Cold War. You might remember NATO had decided to position cruise missiles and Pershing II missiles, extra missiles in Western Europe. Those were the days. In England, you had the Greenham Common Peace Women that were demonstrating against that. And of course, the public information division at SHAPE had a lot of work to do there. We had, for example, lots of school classes that came from Germany with their teachers that were completely anti-military. And then we tried to give presentations, somehow get into their hearts and say that, this what we do is very important, and armaments can be very important. And for example, I was allowed to join in presentations, write little bits of presentations that addressed young people better. And that was, I would say, that was right in the middle of history. One funny thing is we had a TV studio for the Supreme Allied Commander, who at the time, it's totally different times. Today SECURE is no longer, I would say, that important or even known. At the time, he would go to places, and it would be almost like a state visit. And so we had a TV studio for him, where we could do television interviews. And in that TV studio, we had General Eisenhower's desk. And what I would do, tasked with writing a little piece, I would sneak into the TV studio and sit at Eisenhower's desk and do it there. That was I felt very good about that at the time.
And you even went to Australia at the end of your time for a short period, and then after that you went to Braunschweig and Aachen,
yes,
the technical universities, and so you read mechanical and chemical engineering.
Yes. A bit of explanation. That is under the German system. The traditional former polytechnical colleges that then became technical universities, they only knew mechanical engineering. Whatever you read, it was all mechanical engineering. And I would say my education somehow was more applied physics, applied mathematics, and applied physics than engineering. That was their tradition. And chemical engineering that I read in the second half in Aachen was a branch of that. So yet, if you look at my diploma, it will tell you mechanical engineering, and then you have to go into the fine print to work out that I've read a lot of chemical engineering too.
Right, and then you had a short time as a junior researcher at a government institute for biotechnological research, and then moved on to Coalbus. I'm enjoying all of this, Kai, because as I said when we were chatting earlier, Germany has become one of our favorite holiday destinations, and it was further encouraged when I was able to come with my family many years ago now, before the vor der Wende, before the changes, and we went through from Helmstedt to Berlin on the military corridor, and it was very exciting. We camped in tents on Gatow Air Base in West Berlin.
Oh, okay. Yes, I never did the corridor. I went to Berlin once in my younger days, and that was with British European Airways. That was by plane. And then after my military time, I was barred from using the corridor because I was considered to be knowing secrets. And by the time this ban lapsed, we had the Wende, and it was all over. So
yeah. Well, it was the beginning of doing some exciting holidays. We went to East Germany, and then eventually to Czechoslovakia and Poland, and indeed all of this was during the previous dispensation. So you had to. It was quite difficult to go, and as a clergyman, you were very suspicious. They were very suspicious of you. Yes. They always thought you were up to no good. But then tell us, so you started with Coalbus quite a long while ago now, and did you start as an engineer there? Yes, indeed. Although I was hired, and my contract said that I was considered a trainee for future management positions in the group. Coalbus at the time styled themselves a group, and they had plenty of interests outside the bookbinding machinery division. But I did start out as a mechanical engineer, and I worked on bookcase making machines, specifically on the glue application devices that go on those bookcase making machines. And yes, I would say I took quite a deep dive into the nitty-gritty and learned a lot about the business in that phase too. Although it was short, and that was back in 1991. German engineering industry ran into very hard times. I think that's not very common knowledge even in Germany. And the engineering industry here was quite dependent on the Eastern Bloc, who were very inefficient, and for their production needs, where Western customers would have bought one machine, they bought 4 machines. 2 because they had half the efficiency, and another 2 for spare parts.
When that disappeared, there were hard times. So Coalbus separated from the group. I was separated from my contract as a future management trainee, and I was transferred to the sales department because they needed urgent help there. But I did start out as an engineer, and then actually there are still things in Coalbus machines being sold today that I have designed, tiny little bits.
But you were basically on a management training course, yes, as it were. Yeah, I did a similar thing with Shell, the oil company, early on. Now, tell me, they say that the gluing processes now and the glues they use in books are infinitely superior to what they were like a generation ago. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would say it's like a pendulum swinging back. I would say in the pre-industrial and early bookbinding times, they would have been very good and lasted forever. And then in the first few decades of industrial bookbinding, they became terrible. I mean, you had smoking hot melt pots that stank and were I would say even a safety hazard. And the books that were made with them were neither nice to handle nor long lasting. And then I would say from that, industrial glues have come a long way, where I would say today they are reasonably priced, easy to use, and you can make a decent book and it will last many years. So yeah, I would say you're correct, but it's been a long way.
And during all of this, Kai, presumably, bearing in mind what you said about being brought up in Bremen, you enjoyed a certain amount of travel, did you?
Oh yes. As soon as I was transferred to sales, my first area of responsibility was France and Northern Africa, and the very first machine I sold was in Casablanca, Morocco. I would say I had always hoped that in conjunction with my career I would get opportunity to travel, and as soon as I sold machines for Callbus, I would say I got more or less all I wanted. Yes, starting out Northern Africa, France, the Middle East, then later North America, and then in the later part of my career all the world. Yes, and I would say I mostly enjoyed it.
Does that mean that in terms of keeping one's friendships going, it was difficult because you were away a lot, or not?
I would say the challenge really was family life.
Yeah.
We have 4 children, and so what it really meant was that any time off work was reserved for the children. I mean, a round of golf on a Saturday or something like that was completely out of the question after what I did for a week, or sometimes for more than a week when it was a longer trip. The rest was definitely for the family. Yes, and friendships. I will also say the way that my career has worked. I have a handful of friends that go back many years, but later years, yeah, there are a few people that have always been together with, and I think that's a natural consequence of that lifestyle. Yes.
And after a couple of years with end-of-line packaging experts, you're at the present having a what you called a pandemic-enforced sabbatical.
Yes, it's. I would say it has resulted in inactivity. Theoretically, there is a lot that you can do. As we're talking via video right now, but it does slow things down. And I would say the past 6-7 months, I have had less activity than I would have had if it hadn't been for the restrictions of the pandemic. It is you do need direct personal contact to start something, I'm sure.
And some of those friends now, I suppose, would be stationers. And I see you go back quite a long way in as much as I suppose it was through Callbus colleagues that you came to stationers?
It was Robert Flether's predecessor, Gordon Robson. We met at a trade show in Paris in 1992, and our first longer conversation, he told me about livery companies, and he's a playing card maker as well as a stationer. So of course he's a very enthusiastic liveryman, and I had a very good introduction through him. So I would say from then on, I've had a very, without my own experience, but I've had a very positive view of livery companies since then.
I think I'll have to sort of, as ever, try and draw this to a conclusion, because I'm never very good at the timing. But tell me one last question then. When you get released from your pandemic-enforced sabbatical, what would you like to be doing next?
Oh, still be working somewhere around paper, printing, packaging. It's a huge field, from building a machine through printing something, making something out of paper, all the way to the end customers, like publishers or brand owners who use packaging. It's a vast field, and I'm sure through some of the contacts, something will come up that I'll have some more activity on than presently.
Well, I'm hoping that in a post-pandemic journey back to Britain, we might meet, perhaps at a dinner or something in the not too distant future, Kai.
Yeah, well,
it's been really good fun talking to you.
Well, thank you. Yes, I can assure you, my first significant trip will be to Stationers Hall as soon as it's open.
That's wonderful. I've loved talking with you and about Germany, as I said, one of our favorite countries. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.